Welcome to part 8 of the Roman Empire. We're going to start talking a two-part series on the good, the bad, and the crazy. During the first 2 centuries, the Roman Empire reached some of its greatest heights and arguably some of its lowest depths. Right? Augustus, creating that reliance on bloodlines for succession, led to the unstable reigns of the Julio-Claudian emperors that followed, and that was followed later by the even nearly as disastrous Flavians, right? Now, there is a fortunate time period in the middle there where you have the time period of the 5 good emperors that were men that were selected for talent rather than hereditary. They rose to the throne and made the 2nd century CE Rome the most successful period in terms of peace, prosperity, and culture. But then that success wouldn't last with the arrival of the soldier emperors, which signals a return to chaos in the Roman Empire. So with the death of Tiberius, the throne fell to a man named Caligula. Caligula literally means little boots. Caligula got this name from when he would wear little legionnaire boots when he would accompany his father on military expeditions. So he was adoringly called Caligula, or little boots, right? He was still quite young when he became emperor after Tiberius had died. But he'll quickly embark on a reign of terror, right? For example, for entertainment, he liked watching people being tortured to death. Whenever he kissed his wife, he would whisper in her ear, "You know, I could have this beautiful throat cut anytime I please." His favorite saying was, "Let everyone hate me as long as they fear me," right? So this leader of the known world spent his free time, according to one source, just staring in the mirror, making horrid and disgusting faces at himself. One thing that he did have that he shared with many other Romans was he had a deep love of horses and chariot racing. In fact, his favorite horse was a horse by the name of Incitatus. Incitatus which means speedy, was just the love of his life, right? He had a special marble stable built for Incitatus, and on race days he would actually station guards around the area with orders to kill anyone who was making noise near the stable, just to make sure that Incitatus got a good night's rest before a race. It was even rumored that Caligula had made plans to have Incitatus appointed to the consulship and be made one of the consuls, right? After about 4 years of these types of actions, and not to mention the sexual exploits, which he's most famous for, Caligula was actually murdered by the commanders of his own bodyguard, who were literally fed up with his debauchery, right? So Caligula is the first disastrous result of Augustus' decisions to make secession based on the principle of heredity, but it's not going to be the last, right? Caligula had no obvious successor, okay? And while the Senate was dithering, the Praetorian guardsmen, the emperor's bodyguards, were busy looting the palace. While they were doing that, they discovered Caligula's uncle, a guy by the name of Claudius, hiding behind a curtain. Now, Claudius had never been taken seriously because he had several physical handicaps, right, including a speech impediment, and because of this, he was actually regarded as dim-witted, which is ironic because he was actually really sharp. He had a really sharp intellect. Okay, so at the spur of the moment, the Praetorian guards named him emperor. And this kind of reveals something about the Roman Empire. The real center of power lays with the guards. Whoever the soldiers support is the man that's going to be emperor at the end of the day, right? Now, Claudius went through several wives. He wasn't a horrible emperor per se, but he finally went and married his own niece and adopted her son, a man by the name of Nero. Okay. Now, Claudius had ruled a fairly long time. He constructed a number of important public works, such as a new harbor in Rome and one of the major aqueducts, but he died in 54 CE, possibly by after eating a bowl of poisoned mushrooms that had been tainted by his wife / niece and stepson. Okay, so Nero then assumes the power. Now, for a few years, while Nero was under the influence of his tutors, including a famous Stoic philosopher by the name of Seneca, he was actually a pretty decent emperor, right? But soon, Nero begins to turn against his mentors. As a matter of fact, he forced Seneca to commit suicide, and he seems to have gone insane. And he began to embark on a reign of terror and debauchery that tried to rival that of his predecessor Caligula. right? In the course of his madness, Nero managed to murder pretty much every member of his family, right? In addition to probably having murdered his stepfather, it is thought that he probably murdered his brother, his aunt, his stepson, and finally even his own mother. As a matter of fact, the death of his mother is kind of interesting when we look at it because it's a series of almost comically failed assassination attempts, right? His first attempt to kill her was, well, on no less than 3 occasions, he had tried to poison her, like apparently he had done with Claudius. But, she knows her son, and she had foreseen these attempts. And so before each meal, she would always drink the antidotes to poisons, right? So since failing to poison her wasn't working, he decided to try a different tactic. He had her a new bedroom constructed. This was a bedroom that was complete with a special ceiling that was actually designed to collapse and fall on her and crush her. Now, unfortunately for Nero, she was tipped off by one of the builders that that's what this ceiling did, and so she avoided the trap. So next he thought, well, I'll try something different. He invited her to a picnic on an island, and he had a boat prepared for her, and this was a special boat. This boat was designed to actually collapse and fall apart, right? This was an attempt that while she was being rowed out, the boat would fall apart and she would drown. Now, this time, everything went off without a hitch. The boat was being rowed out there. The boat fell apart. She was in the water. And then Nero realized the one thing that he had not calculated. Nero's mother could swim. And she swam to the shore. I mean, this is starting to look like a Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner skit, the way this is working. Finally, Nero just finally got frustrated with the entire thing and just ordered one of his servants to strangle her, right? Now, Nero even went on to marry his stepsister, but he killed her too. Nero's favorite pastime was actually to wander around the streets of Rome disguised as just a peasant, and he would mug random people, sometimes killing them. Ultimately, in 68 CE, he was killed by one of his own slaves in the palace during a revolt against him. And collectively, this first set of emperors, the Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero emperors, are referred to as the Julio-Claudians, right? But Nero's death caused an interesting problem, an interesting crisis for the Roman Empire. Augustus had set that precedent that the throne passes on to the nearest male family member. But Nero had killed them all. There were no male Julio Claudians left. So who gets the throne? So with the death of Nero, we have a secession crisis, and we're in Rome. How do we solve secession crises? We have another civil war. And so during the year 69, a civil war is going to break out. And in that year, the Romans are going to run through no less than 4 emperors, right? Now, finally, a man by the name of Vespasian is going to reign victorious. He's from the Flavian family, and this is going to begin the Flavian Emperors, right? Now, Vespasian was kind of like another Augustus. He ruled wisely. He lived modestly. He undertook a series of different public works, right? He's also known to have a very crude sense of humor. He's known for making obscene jokes, right? But he was also fairly old at the time that he took power. Now, initially, this doesn't seem like it's much of a problem because Vespasian had a very popular son by the name of Titus, right? Titus had already successfully commanded Roman armies. He even had suppressed a rather famous Jewish revolt back east. And so when Vespasian did die, there was a really smooth transition to Titus. It was during Titus's reign that we're going to have a lot of significant things happen. For example, the Roman Colosseum that we know now was built under the reign of Emperor Titus. It was also during his reign that Mount Vesuvius erupted, burying the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum, right? But Titus isn't going to live very long. He's going to die only after a few years. And then the next emperor was Vespasian's younger son, a guy by the name of Domitian. Now, Domitian, unfortunately, turned out to be a little bit more in the mold of Caligula and Nero, right? He was a very imposing and very sadistic figure in Roman leadership. For example, he put many senators to death. Matter of fact, he really enjoyed terrorizing the Senate. There's one story that he invited a large group of the Senate to a special dinner called Feast of Death at his palace. And when the senators arrived, they found the entire dining room was draped in black cloth with black plates and black glasses and black eating utensils, and even the food was black, right? The senators all had their places at the table, and they're marked with little place settings that were carved out of tombstones, little tombstone place settings. And the terrified senators sat through this dinner, absolutely convinced that the end of this meal would culminate with the end of their lives. But when the meal was all over, Domitian just went, "Oh, hey, great meal. Thanks for coming. We'll see you all next time." And these guys left with the fear still shaking inside them, but at least content enough to have left with their lives, right? In the idle hours, Domitian was known to lock his way into a little room in the palace and just catch flies and impale them on pins. Matter of fact, this leads to one of the old Roman jokes that still survives to this day, where one Roman asks another, "Who's with the emperor today?" And the reply is, "No one, not even a fly." In 96 CE, Domitian was assassinated, and this marked the end of the Flavian dynasty and, once again, another secession crisis.